The mockery, the vast emptiness of the Caldrith sector glittered with thousands of warships, each one a masterpiece of alien engineering. The annual military assessment gathering brought together the most powerful civilizations in known space, and this year promised to be particularly interesting. For the first time in galactic history, humanity had been invited to participate. Captain Marcus Webb stood alone on the observation deck of the UES Titan, watching the alien fleets maneuver through space like schools of luminescent fish. At 47 years old, Webb had spent half his life in military service, rising through the ranks during humanity's expansion into the outer colonies. His weathered face bore the marks of someone who had seen combat up close, and his gray eyes missed nothing as they studied the assembled forces before him. The Caldrith, Empire's flagship, dominated the center of the formation, a vessel so massive it generated its own gravitational field. The ship's hull seemed to be made of living metal that shifted colors constantly, reflecting light in ways that human eyes found disorienting. Commander Thaxel, the Caldrith's supreme military leader, had made it clear that this gathering was meant to establish the pecking order of galactic military might. Every species present understood that rankings determined everything from trade, negotiations to territorial disputes. Webb's second in command, Lieutenant Sarah Morrison, approached from behind, her boots clicking softly on the metal deck. She was young for her rank, barely 30, but she had proven herself during the Outer Rim skirmishes, when human colonies came under attack from automated defense systems left behind by an ancient civilization. Morrison had a sharp mind for tactics and an even sharper tongue when dealing with bureaucrats. "Captain, the Caldrith are requesting our arrival coordinates," Morrison said, holding a data tablet. "They want us to take position in the outer ring with the observer vessels." Webb smiled without humor. The outer ring was reserved for ships that were present merely as witnesses, not participants. It was a diplomatic way of suggesting that humanity's contribution wasn't worthy of serious consideration. He had expected this kind of reception. "Tell them we'll be taking position in the primary formation, third tier, Section 7, Webb replied calmly. Morrison raised an eyebrow. "Sir, that's right in the middle of the combat-rated vessels. The Caldrith won't like it." "I suspect they won't," Webb agreed. "But we weren't invited here to sit on the sidelines and watch. Transmit our coordinates and let's get the Titan moving." The U-East Titan began its approach toward the assembled fleets, and almost immediately, the communication channels erupted with activity. Unlike the sleek alien vessels that seemed to glide through space as if physics were merely suggestions, the Titan moved with deliberate, almost plodding progress. The ship was enormous, nearly twice the size of most heavy cruisers. But its design philosophy was radically different from anything the galaxy had seen, where alien ships featured smooth curves and elegant lines. The Titan was all angles and brutal functionality. Its hull was composed of layered armor plating that gave it the appearance of a flying fortress. Massive thruster arrays pushed the vessel forward with steady, reliable force rather than the exotic propulsion systems favored by other species. To anyone watching, it looked like humanity had brought an ancient battleship to a race of starfighters. The first comments came from the Vexian fleet, a collection of sleek vessels that seemed almost skeletal in their construction. The Vexians had evolved in a low-gravity environment, and their ships reflected their preference for speed and maneuverability over raw power. Commander Zixara's voice carried across the open channels with barely concealed amusement. "Is that truly a warship?" Zixara asked, her translated words dripping with sarcasm. "It appears the humans have mistaken this gathering for a construction exhibition. Perhaps they brought equipment for building space stations." Laughter rippled through multiple channels as other species joined in the mockery. The Morphids, a collective intelligence that operated ships grown from organic matter, added their own observations. Their communication came through as a chorus of overlapping voices, creating an eerie harmony. The human vessel moves like a wounded creature, the Morphid Collective stated. We have seedlings that travel faster through the void. Did humanity forget to install proper engines? Webb listened to the commentary without visible reaction, but Morrison's face flushed with anger. She looked to her captain, waiting for permission to respond, but Webb simply shook his head. There would be time for words later. Right now, he wanted the aliens to underestimate them as much as possible. The Titan continued its steady approach, taking its position among vessels that could travel faster than light within normal space. That could phase through solid matter, or that could generate temporary wormholes for instantaneous repositioning. By comparison, humanity's ship seemed laughably primitive, relying on fusion drives and Newton's laws to move through the cosmos. Commander Thaxel himself finally addressed the Titan directly, his voice carrying the authority of a species that had ruled their sector for 10,000 years. The Cauldrith were massive beings, evolved from pack hunters on a high-gravity world, and their natural aggression had translated into a military culture that valued strength above all else. Human Captain, Thaxel began, his words carefully chosen to sound diplomatic while still conveying condescension. We acknowledge your presence at this gathering. However, we must express concern about your vessel's capabilities. The assessments we will conduct require certain minimum performance standards. Your ship's velocity alone suggests it may not be suitable for combat-level evaluations. Webb activated his communication system, and his voice carried the calm confidence of someone who had nothing to prove but intended to prove it anyway. Commander Thaxel, I appreciate your concern. The Titan is indeed slower than every ship present. We cannot fold space, phase through dimensions, or teleport across the battlefield. What we can do, however, is accomplish our mission objectives. I believe that's the true measure of military capability. The communication channels buzzed with commentary as various species discussed this bold statement from the primitive humans. Some found it endearing, like a child claiming they could compete with adults. Others found it insulting, as if humanity didn't understand the vast technological gap that separated them from the established powers. The Vexian commander responded with clear disdain. Mission objectives? Captain Webb, modern warfare is decided in microseconds. Ships that cannot achieve faster-than-light combat speeds are simply targets. Your vessel would be destroyed before your weapons could even lock onto an enemy. Perhaps, Webb acknowledged, but I notice this gathering includes actual combat simulations, not just theoretical discussions. I'd like to request participation in the fleet engagement scenario. The silence that followed was profound. The fleet engagement scenario was the centerpiece of the entire gathering, a massive simulation where participating ships would face off against each other in a complex tactical situation. It was meant to showcase the finest aspects of each civilization's military doctrine and technological advancement. The idea that humanity's slow, primitive vessel could contribute anything meaningful was absurd. Thaxel's response came after a long pause. Captain Webb, the fleet engagement is designed for vessels capable of dynamic combat operations. Your ship's limitations would make it a liability to any fleet formation. Perhaps you would be better suited for the logistical support demonstrations. Morrison muttered something under her breath that Webb chose not to hear. He understood her frustration, but he also understood that this was exactly the reaction they needed. Every species present now believed that humanity was out of their depth, that the Titan was nothing more than a slow-moving target with delusions of grandeur. Commander Thaxel, Webb said carefully, I understand your concerns. However, humanity didn't travel 300 light years to watch from the sidelines. If our participation causes problems during the simulation, you can remove us from the exercise. But I'm formally requesting that you give us one chance to demonstrate what human military engineering can accomplish. The communication channels exploded with debate. Some species argued that allowing the humans to participate would be a waste of time and resources. Others suggested it might be entertaining to watch them fail. A few voices, mostly from smaller civilizations that had also faced dismissive treatment from the major powers, expressed support for giving humanity a chance. Finally, Thaxel made his decision. "Very well, Captain Webb. The Titan will be assigned to the Defender fleet in tomorrow's simulation. You will work alongside the Morphid Collective and 3 Vexian frigates to protect a designated zone against a superior attacking force. I hope you understand that this will be a genuine combat simulation with real consequences for diplomatic standings. If your vessel performs inadequately, it will reflect on humanity's petition for expanded council representation." Webb smiled. "Understood, Commander. We won't disappoint you." As the communication channel closed, Morrison turned to her captain with concern evident on her face. "Sir?" "They're setting us up to fail. The Defender scenarios are always outnumbered 3-1, and they've paired us with species that have already made it clear they think we're a joke. The Morphids will probably ignore our tactical suggestions entirely." "Let them," Webb replied, moving toward the exit. "Right now, everyone in this sector believes the Titan is nothing more than a slow, outdated relic. They think our weapons are primitive and our tactics are centuries behind modern warfare. That's exactly what I want them to think." Morrison followed him down the corridor toward the bridge. "Captain, what exactly is the plan here? The Titan is slow. Our weapons do rely on conventional technology. Unless we're hiding something significant, tomorrow's simulation is going to be a massacre." Webb stopped at the entrance to the bridge and turned to face his second-in-command. His expression was serious, but there was a gleam in his eyes that Morrison had learned to recognize. It was the look of a strategist who had already seen 3 moves ahead on the board. "Lieutenant, do you remember why they built the Titan the way they did?" Webb asked. "Why we spent 15 years developing a ship that's slower than every other vessel in human space." Morrison thought for a moment. The official records say it was designed as a siege platform. Maximum firepower and armor at the expense of speed and maneuverability. "That's what the records say," Webb agreed. "But there's a reason siege warfare existed for thousands of years in human history. Speed isn't everything in combat. Sometimes the ability to sit in one place and destroy. Everything around you is more valuable than the ability to run away quickly." He gestured toward the viewport where alien ships continued their graceful dances through space, showing off their technological superiority. Every species out there has spent millennia developing faster ships, better shields, more exotic weapons. They've created vessels that can dodge, weave, teleport, and phase through attacks. They've built their entire military doctrine around the idea that mobility equals survival. "And we haven't," Morrison said slowly, beginning to understand. "We haven't," Webb confirmed, "because humanity learned warfare in a different school. We learned it in trenches and bunkers, in fortified positions that couldn't retreat but refused to fall. We learned that sometimes you don't need to be fast. You just need to be immovable and hit hard enough that nothing can stand against you." Morrison's eyes widened. "The Titan isn't meant to fight like their ships at all." "Exactly," Webb said. "Tomorrow, when the simulation begins, every ship out there is going to use their speed and advanced technology to try and outmaneuver each other. They'll dance around the battlefield, looking for tactical advantages, trying to exploit weaknesses in enemy formations." He smiled coldly. "And the Titan is going to do what humans have always done when faced with superior numbers and better technology. We're going to plant ourselves in the middle of the defensive zone and dare anyone to try and get past us. Because speed doesn't matter if you can't survive long enough to use it." The bridge crew had gathered to listen to their captain's words, and Webb could see the understanding dawning on their faces. They had trained for months on the Titan's unique systems, practicing tactics that seemed outdated compared to modern galactic warfare. But now they understood why those tactics existed. "Get some rest," Webb ordered. "Tomorrow, we're going to show the galaxy something they've never seen before. We're going to show them what happens when you give humans a fortress and tell them to hold the line." As the crew dispersed to their quarters, Webb remained on the bridge, staring out at the alien fleets. They were beautiful ships, truly magnificent examples of technological achievement. Their crews were skilled, their weapons were powerful, and their tactics were refined by millennia of experience. But they had never faced humanity in a real fight. They had never encountered a species that viewed warfare not as an art form or a competition, but as a brutal necessity where survival mattered more than style. Tomorrow would be educational for everyone involved. The Titan hung in space, silent and seemingly insignificant among the glittering fleet of advanced warships. But inside its armored hull, systems were coming online that the galaxy had never encountered before. Weapons that didn't rely on exotic physics, but on the simple, terrifying principle of overwhelming firepower. Defenses that didn't dodge or phase, but simply absorbed punishment and kept functioning. Webb pulled up the tactical display for tomorrow's simulation. The defending fleet would need to protect a designated zone against waves of attackers for 30 minutes. Standard doctrine suggested mobile defense, using speed to respond to threats as they emerged. The Morphids and Vexians would undoubtedly follow that playbook. The Titan would do something different. Something the aliens wouldn't expect until it was too late. Webb made a few notes in his personal log, then closed the display. Everything was ready. The galaxy was about to learn a hard lesson about humanity. Never underestimate a species that learned to fight on a planet where everything, from the weather to the wildlife, was actively trying to kill them. Never assume that primitive technology means primitive thinking. And never, ever laugh at a human ship just because it's slow. Because sometimes, the slowest ship in the fleet is the one you should fear the most. Asterisk the revelation. Simulation zone materialized in designated space as holographic markers outlined the boundaries of the battlefield. The defending fleet had 30 minutes to protect a three-dimensional cube of space measuring 50,000 kilometers on each side. Any attacking ship that penetrated the zone and remained inside for more than 60 seconds would score points for the attackers. If defenders could prevent penetration or destroy attacking vessels before they secured position, they would earn points for their side. Captain Marcus Webb watched as the other defending ships took their positions. The 3 Vexian frigates immediately spread out across the zone's perimeter, their sleek forms positioned to respond quickly to threats from any direction. The Morphid Collective's bioship settled near the center, its organic hull pulsing with bioluminescent patterns as it coordinated with its distant counterparts. Both groups had positioned themselves according to standard galactic military doctrine, creating a mobile defense that could respond to attacks with speed and flexibility. The Titan moved to the exact center of the defensive zone and stopped. The massive vessel oriented itself carefully, its bow pointing toward the most likely attack vector based on Webb's analysis of the scenario parameters. Then it did something that made every observer in the fleet question whether the humans understood the exercise at all. The Titan extended 4 massive support struts from its hull, locking them into position with mechanical precision. Commander Zixara's voice crackled over the communication channel, confusion evident even through the translation matrix. "Human captain, what are you doing? You cannot anchor yourself in space during a combat simulation. You must maintain mobility to respond to threats." Webb's response was calm and measured. "Commander, the Titan is positioned exactly where it needs to be. We'll hold this position for the duration of the exercise." The Morphid Collective's chorus of voices joined the conversation, their harmonics expressing something between concern and bewilderment. The human vessel has made itself a stationary target. This contradicts all established tactical doctrine. Mobile defense requires the ability to relocate rapidly as threat vectors change. We're aware of standard doctrine, Webb replied. Humanity has chosen a different approach. Lieutenant Morrison stood at the weapons station, running final checks on systems that had been locked down and hidden during the journey to Caldrith space. Around her, the bridge crew worked with quiet efficiency, each person knowing their role in what was about to unfold. They had trained for this moment, practiced these exact scenarios dozens of times in simulation. But this was the first time they would demonstrate humanity's new tactical doctrine in front of an audience that believed them to be primitive and outdated. The countdown timer reached 0. And the simulation began. Holographic representations of enemy vessels appeared at the zone's outer boundary, designated by red markers in the tactical display. The attacking force consisted of 15 ships, a mix of fast strike craft and heavier cruisers, all drawn from the Caldrith Empire's own fleet design. They approached from multiple vectors simultaneously, a classic overwhelming assault meant to split defender attention and create gaps in the defensive perimeter. The Vexian frigates immediately sprang into action, their exotic drives propelling them toward the nearest threats at speeds that blurred their outlines. They moved like dancers, weaving between attack vectors and firing precise bursts of coherent energy at the simulated enemy vessels. Their weapons were designed to disable rather than destroy, targeting propulsion systems and shield generators with surgical accuracy. The Morphid bioship released a cloud of what appeared to be organic matter that spread throughout the zone like a living sensor net. Each particle was actually a separate organism, capable of detecting enemy vessels and transmitting data back to the collective. It was an impressive display of biological engineering, creating an early warning system that covered the entire defensive area. The Titan remained motionless at the center of the zone, its weapons system still inactive. From the outside, it appeared the human ship was doing nothing while its allies engaged the enemy. The communication channels filled with commentary from the observing fleets, most of it mocking humanity's apparent paralysis. "The humans have frozen in fear," one voice commented with clear amusement. Perhaps they did not understand this was merely a simulation. "They cannot even pretend to fight," another added. "This is embarrassing to watch." Commander Thaxol's voice carried the weight of disappointment. "Captain Webb, you must engage the enemy vessels. Simply occupying space does not constitute a defensive action." Webb ignored the commentary, his eyes fixed on the tactical display. The attacking ships had split into 3 groups, probing different sections of the defensive zone. The Vexian frigates were handling 2 of the groups effectively, their speed allowing them to be in multiple places almost simultaneously. But the 3rd group, consisting of 5 heavy cruisers, had found a gap in the mobile defense. They were accelerating toward the center of the zone, their trajectory taking them directly toward the Titan's position. "Enemy Group 3 has committed to their attack vector," Morrison reported. "They're coming straight for us, Captain. 5 heavy cruisers in tight formation. Range?" Webb asked calmly. 40,000 kilometers and closing. "At their current speed, they'll reach our position in 90 seconds. Webb nodded slowly. "Weapons status?" Morrison's fingers danced across her console, and throughout the Titan, systems that had been dormant for weeks suddenly roared to life. "All primary systems are online and charging, Captain. Secondary batteries ready. Targeting solutions locked for all incoming vessels." "Hold fire," Webb ordered. "Let them get closer." The attacking cruisers continued their approach, confident in their numerical superiority and the apparent helplessness of the human vessel. They had watched the Titan do nothing while the battle developed around it, and they assumed it was either malfunctioning or crewed by incompetence. Either way, it represented an easy target and a clear path into the defensive zone dot at 30,000 kilometers. The lead cruiser began its deceleration burn, preparing to claim position inside the zone. The other 4 ships followed suit, their formation tightening as they prepared to occupy the space around the stationary human vessel. From their perspective, they had already won this engagement. Range now 25,000 kilometers, Morrison announced. Captain, if we wait much longer, they'll be inside our minimum effective range. Not for what we're about to do, Webb replied quietly. Weapons free, Lieutenant. Show them what the Titan was built for. Morrison's hand came down on the firing control, and the Titan revealed its true nature to a galaxy that had dismissed it as primitive and slow. The ship's hull erupted with light as dozens of weapon ports opened simultaneously. But these weren't the conventional energy weapons or kinetic projectiles that the aliens expected. The Titan's primary armament was something humanity had developed specifically to counter the advanced defensive technologies of galactic civilizations. The resonance cannon was the culmination of 30 years of research into quantum entanglement and wave interference. Human scientists had discovered that while alien shields could deflect energy beams, absorb kinetic impacts, and even phase out of normal space to avoid damage, they all shared one common vulnerability. They existed in the same quantum field as the rest of the universe, and that field could be manipulated. A pulse of invisible energy erupted from the Titan's bow, expanding outward in a perfect sphere. It wasn't a weapon in the traditional sense, because it didn't carry destructive force. Instead, it was a quantum pattern designed to resonate with specific frequencies. The same frequencies used by shield generators, structural integrity fields, and the exotic propulsion systems that allowed ships to move faster than light in normal space. The 5 attacking cruisers hit the resonance field at full speed, and their entire tactical situation changed in an instant. Their shields didn't fail. They simply stopped existing as the quantum patterns maintaining them were disrupted at the fundamental level. Their propulsion systems, which relied on manipulating space-time around their hulls, suddenly found themselves trying to operate in an area where space-time refused to be manipulated. The ships lurched out of their precise formation, their exotic drives sputtering and failing as the resonance field interfered with their most basic operations. But the resonance cannon was only the Titan's opening move. The moment the enemy shields collapsed and their maneuverability vanished, the human ship's secondary weapons activated. These were systems the aliens recognized: conventional electromagnetic railguns and particle beam arrays. But they operated on a scale that made galactic standard weapons look like toys. The Titan had been built with one philosophy in mind: if you can't move fast, make sure nothing can survive getting close to you. Every square meter of the ship's hull was covered with weapon emplacements, creating overlapping fields of fire that left no blind spots. When those weapons opened up simultaneously, the result was devastating. Tungsten projectiles the size of small cars erupted from the railgun batteries, crossing the distance to the disabled enemy ships in seconds. They struck with the force of orbital bombardment weapons, punching through armor that had been designed to deflect energy weapons but had never been tested against pure kinetic force at such extreme velocities. Particle beams followed the kinetic strikes, their focused streams of accelerated matter, cutting through hull plating like plasma torches through paper. The simulated enemy cruisers lasted less than 15 seconds once the Titan opened fire. Their hulls came apart under the sustained bombardment, systems failing in cascading waves as the human weapons systematically dismantled them. The tactical display showed all 5 ships as destroyed, their holographic representations winking out as the simulation registered their complete loss. The communication channels had gone silent. Every species watching the engagement had expected to see the slow human ship overwhelmed and destroyed. Instead, They had witnessed something that challenged their fundamental understanding of modern warfare. The Titan hadn't tried to outmaneuver its enemies or match their technological sophistication. It had simply negated their advantages and then applied overwhelming force. Commander, Zixara was the first to find her voice. What was that weapon? How did you disable their shields without destroying their generators? Webb allowed himself a small smile. The resonance cannon doesn't destroy shields, Commander. It disrupts the quantum entanglement patterns that allow them to function. Once those patterns are broken, the shields simply cease to exist until the generators can re-establish the entanglement, which takes approximately 30 seconds under combat conditions. That's impossible, the Vexian commander protested. Quantum disruption on that scale would require manipulating the fundamental structure of space itself. The energy requirements alone would be astronomical, which is why the Titan is so large and slow, Morrison interjected, unable to keep the satisfaction out of her voice. Every system on this ship exists to power and support the resonance cannon. We're not a fast attack ship or a mobile cruiser. We're a siege platform designed to hold a position and destroy anything that comes within range. The simulation continued, but the dynamic had changed completely. The remaining attacking ships had witnessed what happened to their companions, and they now approached the defensive zone with extreme caution. The Vexian frigates and Morphid bioship had been impressed by the Titan's display, and they began coordinating their tactics to drive enemy vessels toward the human ships. Position rather than trying to handle everything. Themselves, the Morphid collectives. Harmonics carried a note of respect when they communicated with Webb. We understand now why you anchored yourself in the center of the zone. You created a kill zone that enemy vessels cannot safely enter. This is tactically sound, though unconventional. Humanity has always approached warfare differently, Webb replied. We don't try to outrun our enemies or out-technology them. We find their weaknesses and exploit them with maximum force. The second wave of attackers attempted a more sophisticated approach, using decoys and feints to try and draw the Titan's fire while real assault ships moved through gaps in the defense. But Webb had anticipated this tactic. The Titan's sensor arrays, while not as advanced as alien systems, were numerous and redundant. They created a composite picture of the battlefield that was nearly impossible to fool with electronic countermeasures or holographic decoys. When the real attack came, the Titan was ready. The resonance cannon fired again, this time in a focused beam rather than an omnidirectional pulse. The beam swept across 3 attacking ships, disrupting their shields and propulsion simultaneously. The railguns and particle beams followed, and 3 more simulated vessels disappeared from the tactical display.